Hello, my name is John, I'm the geeky fanboy, and this week I went and saw The House That Jack Built, written and directed by Danish filmmaker Lars von Trier, starring Matt Dillon. I must admit I was quite excited to go and see this movie, even though I've never seen a Lars von Trier movie before. I've heard of the guy before, but none of his movies ever came across me, so I've never really seen them, but I was aware of the guy, and when I heard about this movie, I was really thrilled because I'm not only a big fan of horror movies, I'm a big fan especially of like these serial killer slasher type of movies that play with violence and that sort of stuff. Like I'm really interested to see those kinds of stories. So when I saw the trailer for this movie, I was quite thrilled because I enjoy movies that do like to take this step in a more, well, controversial direction. So The House That Jack Built is about a serial killer named Jack who tells us his life story or his career as a serial killer in 5 chapters, which are like random events that happen throughout his 12 years long career. And he tells his story to a man named Verge, who we don't see until the end of the movie, who's played by Bruno Ganz. So I'm trying to keep it spoiler-free for the first couple of minutes, but since this movie is, well, difficult to talk about without giving spoilers away, I'm gonna move into spoilers halfway through this review. Well, I can definitely say that I did enjoy this movie a lot. It has a lot of different things in there I like, not just the way it plays with like the serial killer story and tropes and how it depicts violence and all that sort of stuff we associate with serial killers and murderers, obviously. There's also a lot of like philosophical talk. There's a lot of talk about art and what we perceive as art or what art can be. So we have this interesting mixture of like, yeah, we do have violence, but there's also a lot going on in the background, so to speak, that makes you think about all that stuff you see on screen. What was also really cool was, because I didn't expect this, was that the movie's actually quite funny. Like, it almost has this black dark comedy vibe. Like, there were a lot of scenes, especially in the first half, where you just can't help yourself but laugh at, like the way they play out, especially in the first half, because the character Jack suffers from OCD, in the form where he always constantly has to clean stuff and can never leave a room when he's not sure that it's clean. So there are these hilarious moments where he keeps thinking about, after he's murdered someone, well, what if there's some blood I missed and didn't clean up? So he constantly has to go back and forth to clean stuff up, which gets him into trouble at some point. And there are also just some like inconveniences that happen to him that are just so hilarious, because if you keep thinking about them, it does seem kind of realistic to a degree, because you keep thinking, well, this kind of stuff must come up at some point for a serial killer. Or you just think, oh my god, this is something he has to deal with, or someone like him has to deal with at some point, and it's just played out so hilariously that you do feel like laughing, and it doesn't diminish what's happening on screen. You kind of also find yourself laughing at, well, in a way you find yourself laughing at the violence or at the murders, because maybe something goes wrong, or Jack says or does something in the process of the murder or afterwards, where you just have to chuckle a bit, because it's this very strange sense of humour, but it works really well. So like I said, there's also a lot of like philosophical talk Jack has with this Verge character, and it's mostly between the chapters where the characters or the story kind of like stops a bit or takes a step back, and they have those conversations about like art and all that sort of stuff, because Jack says he is an engineer but also wants to be an architect, and how he kind of connects that with his murders, and that for him his murders are an art form. So he goes on to talk about what he understands as art, and the human nature of violence and how we perceive it, and so on and so on. So you do have those lengthy talks, which can sometimes be a bit too long if you're not really into this sort of stuff. Like, I really enjoy those kind of more philosophical and deeper conversations, so I was really into them. But I also noticed with like the rest of the audience, like especially people sitting next to me, as the movie went on, I noticed that some of the people got a bit bored. So, and I mean, the movie is also like 2.5 hours long. So I can understand that maybe for some people who are not really into this more artsy talk, let's say like that, it can become a bit lengthy. And what I should also mention, without giving away too much spoilers, the ending is quite interesting and takes a bit of a turn. Like, I didn't really expect this sort of ending, or where it takes you. You could say that it's almost like a bit of a twist, because suddenly the feeling and the setting of the entire movie switches a bit, but in an odd way it also really fits into what you've seen the 2 hours before. So I really liked it, but I could imagine some people maybe not liking this switch that happens towards the end. So, and obviously there's also violence, since it's this controversial serial killer movie. I'm gonna move into some more details in the spoiler part, but I can say that I thought like the violence was basically what I expected it to be. Like, especially with this high age rating and what you could see from the trailers and the like the articles people wrote before, or like when the movie was shown at the Cannes Festival. But I honestly thought it's, let's say, average for this kind of age rating. Like, it wasn't too over the top. It wasn't too like self-indulgent. It wasn't, in my humble opinion, it wasn't torture porn or anything. I mean, sure, it has these really close-up violence moments and all that, but I mean, it's a movie about the life of a serial killer, so what do you expect? It's gonna be a bit odd and obviously violent, but at least I would say it was nothing you couldn't really anticipate. So moving on into spoiler territory now. Going into the violence, what I just mentioned, it kind of helps to pick out some points throughout the movie that got the most attention at the screening I attended. Probably the most controversial parts in the movie was like the first one. I don't know if it's the first one, but I'm just gonna mention it first. Is when we see a young Jack as a kid, and he catches a duckling, and he cuts its leg off and then puts it back into the water, and we see the duckling like kind of swimming helplessly for a couple of seconds. Like, that got a reaction out of the people, where you could really hear them in the cinema going like, oh no. I was okay with it, and normally I'm not good with animal violence. Like, I'm fine with human violence, honestly, in movies, but normally when animals are involved, I'm like, nah. But it was fine. You don't really, yeah, like, you see him cut the leg off, but like, that's it. There isn't even like blood or anything. It's fine. And animal rights organizations said that it was fine, that no duck was hurt. So I'm like, yeah, okay, it's fine. And you don't even see the duckling suffer. You just see it like flap in the water for 5 seconds and then it cuts away. So like that's basically it. Then another thing that got like audible gasps was, I'm not sure if it's the fourth or the fifth incident, like with the blonde woman whom he's dating, and he cuts her breasts off. Like, that really got some audible gasps in the audience when he puts the knife and starts cutting. Like, I was also fine with that because it cuts away before like anything more happens. Like, you see the knife slice in, but like not all the way. So that's it. And yeah, again, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, I kind of expected this to happen from this kind of movie. So yeah, I was fine with it in a way. So, and now probably the most controversial part of this movie was in, is it the third incident? I'm not sure. But like during one of the incidences, he takes out a family he is kind of like a part of now, he befriended or whatever. And he takes a family out to a hunting trip. So it's a mother and two boys who are like, I don't know, 7, 8 years old or something. And he wants to show them how to use guns. And at some point it cuts and you suddenly have the mother and the two boys out running and you hear gunshots in the distance. So it immediately kind of becomes clear, oh, okay, Jack is hunting the family. So, and the controversial thing happens when he does actually shoot the two boys. This was actually the point where someone left at our screening. Like, he killed the two boys and then I heard some shuffling behind me and a woman left. And again, I must say, it's yeah, I mean, it's something that happens. I mean, I keep saying, what do you expect? Like, also the violence, again, especially in this case, it's not overly gruesome. Like, he doesn't continue to torture the kids so they die. Like, they get killed clean, headshot, and that's it. And afterwards, he kind of poses their bodies with the mother who's still alive in between, as in this sort of picnic scene. So I guess that was a bit grotesque. It does look grotesque, but again, it's played with this little bit of humor where it's this odd thing where Jack enjoys it and the mother just sits in between and is horrified. And added to this, later he takes one of the boys, like after he's dead, and like performs taxidermy on the boy's body and makes it look like this really grotesque, almost clown-like figure he has in his freezer. And like you see a couple of seconds throughout the movie, you keep seeing this boy, and I can understand that this is a little horrifying because it almost has this like puppet sort of face, which does admittedly look kind of creepy. So yeah, those were like the moments that got like the biggest reactions out of the audience. But like the most controversial thing, quote unquote, was for me, like it wasn't really controversial, but what got me thinking was not actually something he did, but something that was said in the movie when he's with the blonde woman who he's dated for some time apparently, and then when he's got her cuffed and everything, he says something along the lines of, you know, we men always have it bad, you always blame us. If you're unfortunate enough to be born a man, you're born guilty, and women are always the victims. And you could hear the women in the audience going like, And that also got me kind of thinking, because that was the line where I thought, well, that's probably something the audience is gonna get upset about, because especially with all the stuff that's been going on, the past 2 or 3 years, I thought this was a line that's gonna stick. So I thought that, this was interesting, and also something that was part of the like art and philosophy discussions, where he keeps comparing art to real life violence that has happened. So we do have like a lot of history violence creeping up as well, where he compares like murder or violence techniques coming from like the Nazis in the 30s and 40s, and like World War II violence and all that sort of stuff. And you also have some real life footage being cut in towards the end, like of the Holocaust and stuff like that, which was also something where I kept thinking this is quite effective. And as soon as you kind of mention Nazis and Third Reich and all that stuff, it automatically makes people listen up. So I also thought this is something people are gonna, yeah, they're gonna keep that in mind. Okay, and to wrap this up, like, to talk a bit about the ending. The ending was quite interesting because I kept thinking that, because we don't see Verge until the end of the movie, I kept thinking, oh, maybe he's on death row, or maybe he's like about to get killed by lethal injection or something, and he's talking to a priest, or you know, someone who's there to listen to his last words, so to speak. But no, it turns out that he's this guy that leads him through the circles of hell, literally, after he's built his house finally. And I thought that was so interesting. Afterwards, I also looked a lot of stuff up to see if I missed anything, because at first, I didn't get that Virgil was like Virgil from the Divine Comedy and all that, but after I read a bit and thought about it, I quickly jumped to the conclusion how this made sense. And there's some great imagery and cinematography towards the ending with the images that like almost look like they're standing still, but they're moving like really, really slowly. They look so good. And this whole design and concept of the circles of hell was really cool. And those entire like last, I don't know, was it like 20 minutes maybe, made you like almost like rethink a lot of stuff that you've just previously seen. It almost, like I said earlier, it almost feels a bit disconnected in a way, but if you keep thinking about it, it fits together very nicely. And I thought this ending was really, really interesting, and you could probably talk about those last 20 minutes alone for quite a while. Okay, to sum up this review, the house that Jack built is a polarising and to a certain degree a controversial movie. I personally really enjoyed it. It's very much self-aware of what it's doing. It plays a lot like with those serial killer and murderer tropes, you know, from other movies. It has a surprising amount of comedy that really helps to watch this movie. And sure, the movie can be a bit long and be a bit like maybe too philosophical, depending on what you like, and maybe a little too self-indulgent, but in a way that makes this movie even more interesting and even smarter, because I would imagine that if you watch this movie, everyone has his different kind of opinion watching this movie, so it would be really interesting to like discuss this movie afterwards with like a group of people, because I would think that everyone has different thoughts, and only on the ending, which is, like I said, interesting in its own thing, but like the whole concept of what this movie discusses and plays with. There's a lot you can talk about, and there's just so much in there you can laugh at, you can think about, you can be shocked by, or whatever. But if you're a fan of like those serial killer types of movies, or horror, psychological horror, do go and watch this movie if you can. It's really, really good. So this was my review of The House That Jack Built. Have you seen the movie? Do tell me in the comments below. It would be quite interesting to see what other people think, because I've watched the movie on my own. Like, I've got no one in my circle of friends who's seen this movie. So yeah, do tell me in the comments what you thought about the movie if you've seen it. this was it for me. I hope you did enjoy this review, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.